Looking at the international stories as regards to business, more debt financing was cancelled or postponed globally in 2022 than even during the tumultuous pandemic period. Roughly 140 fundraising transactions, including bonds, loans, and asset-backed securities worth at least $75 billion were pulled in 2022, only slightly below the combined tally of 2021 and 2020. This is according to data compiled by Bloomberg. The war in Ukraine, high inflation, soaring interest rates, and recession concerns combined to scare investors off this year. The first quarter alone saw 50 deals shelved and pessimism continuing throughout the year as lenders remained weary. European Union nations will make a fresh attempt at reaching a deal on a controversial proposal to cap high natural gas prices as the region battles a blast of winter freeze. The plan to intervene in the markets, unveiled by the European Commission last month, has caused a deep rift among member nations, which are racing to strike a deal on a broader package of emergency measures before the end of the year. EU Energy Commissioner Kadri Simpson told reporters on Tuesday that the discussions may be the most difficult yet. The November U.S. budget deficit jumped by $57 billion, or 30%, from a year earlier to $249 billion from the month. Looking at the revenues, which fell, and outlays for education, health, and interest on the public debt rising sharply. The U.S. Treasury said on Monday that the receipts for November fell 10% to $29 billion from a year earlier to $252 billion, while outlays rose 6%, or $28 billion to $501 billion, also recorded in November. China has launched a trade dispute at the World Trade Organization against the United States over its cheap export control measures. China's Commerce Ministry has said the United States passed a sweeping set of regulations in October aimed at kneecapping China's semiconductor industry, prompting a complaint from atop China trade. According to a statement by China's Commerce Ministry, its diplomatic mission in Geneva relayed that the Asian country will take legal actions within the WTO framework as a necessary way to address concerns and defend legitimate interests. Now, the Bahrain authorities have arrested former FTX founder and CEO Sam Bankman-Fried on Monday evening. The development comes one day before Bankman-Fried had agreed to testify before the U.S. House Financial Services Committee regarding the collapse of his Nassau-based exchange. Now, according to a statement shared by the Bahamian Office of the Attorney General and Ministry of Legal Affairs, the Royal Bahamas Police detained Bankman-Fried following receipt of a formal notification from the United States that it has filed criminal charges against the fallen crypto billionaire. Finally, oil extended gains on Tuesday as a key pipeline bringing supply to the United States remains shut, adding to concerns about potential tightness in the world's biggest crude consumer. Brent crude futures rose $1.33 or 1.7% to $79.32 per barrel by 0725 GMT, while U.S. West Texas Intermediate crude futures gained $1.15 or 1.6% to $74.32. Both benchmarks settled up more than 2% in the previous session. And that's it on international business news. And now to our next conversation, which has to do with South Africa's tourism that is set to be looking positive as of now, even as it is showing signs of recovery. Now, one of Africa's most profitable tourism destinations suffered immediate and severe consequences from the outbreak of COVID-19. And with the lockdowns and restrictions put in place, not just in South Africa, but in the countries where its tourists come from, the industry has struggled to find its footings 2 years down the line. But there appears to be some light shining in the tunnel. South Africa's tourism minister, that is Lindiwe Sisulu, says the country is gearing up for a bumper festive season now that the threat of COVID-19 appears to have eased. Tourism is critical to South Africa's socio-economic development, providing employment, entrepreneurship opportunities, much needed foreign currency earnings, and more. And now, this morning, we are joined by Tshivhengwa, who is the CEO of the Tourism Business Council of South Africa, in South Africa, of course, Pretoria to be precise. Thank you so much, Tshifhiwa, for joining our conversation.
Thank you for having me. Good morning or good afternoon to yourselves.
Nice to have you around. Now, we understand that for some years now, South Africa has struggled with its economy, but then particularly the tourism industry, which has staggered due to certain unprecedented circumstances. Now, how did South Africa get to start showing these positive signs that we are seeing, and what does it actually mean in terms of its economy?
Well, what we have seen is that, during COVID, we went through a patch which was very rough in terms of tourism due to, South Africa being red listed by various countries and also lots of advisories against, ourselves as South Africans traveling to other, destinations, outside of South Africa. Of course, also our own restrictions here at home in terms of the movement of people did have a huge impact during COVID. Now, this year, we then started moving out of COVID, and we have been talking about the pent-up demand in our source markets, mainly in the northern Americas, which is the USA and Canada, and also in Europe, including the UK. We did see that there was pent-up demand. People wanted to travel, but because of the restrictions, they couldn't travel. What we are seeing now is that we have removed all the restrictions that has to do with COVID. So many countries around the world have done the same. But what we have seen is that more and more airlines are flying back into South Africa or rescheduling back into South Africa. Those that are already flying into South Africa have increased capacity to South Africa, and therefore we're starting to see more movements from USA. To be more specific, we have seen introduction of new routes. Washington, D.C. to Cape Town, and many other routes, increasing capacity into Johannesburg, and also others that are coming from Europe that introduce new routes into South Africa. So we are seeing that there is more and more appetite for airlines, which means that there is demand on the ground. Our source markets are starting to see that people are demanding our destination, and therefore we have seen over the past few months the increase in arrivals. Especially from the markets that I've mentioned. We've seen that, compared to the 2 years of COVID, we've seen huge figures. But when we compare to 2019, we still are behind and we still have to do more work.
Talking about being behind, we are aware that one of the issues that South Africa is currently struggling with is the issue of power cuts and load shedding. How is that also affecting the tourism industry?
Well, that is negative for the tourism industry because we run large accommodation, meaning large hotels in various areas across the country. And with large accommodation establishments, you really need to have huge machinery, to keep the lights on. And the cost that goes into that, it means that the bottom line is going to be affected because the input cost is going to rise by way of buying diesel. And also small businesses are suffering because you got to buy generator, you got to make sure that you powered up and so forth and so on. So there is an impact on the bottom line. From the experience point of view, we continue to offer the same experience, if not more than what we're doing in the previous years. We do understand load shedding has been with us for the past 10 years plus, and it's something that we've lived with for quite some time. Of course, in December, now it's ramped up. So it's something of concern, and it concerns all other businesses, but it's business as usual on the ground. People are traveling, hotels are getting fuller, and lots of families will be traveling starting from this weekend to go to visit their friends and relatives and to go to coastal regions, mountainous region, to safaris to make sure that they enjoy the festive season with their friends and family. So it does have an impact. We are managing it. Nothing has changed on the ground. Of course, it's going to hit us on the bottom line in the near future.
All right, we cannot but talk about the issue of security too, which is a major issue in South Africa. Though it's not exclusive to South Africa, but then it is affecting the tourism industry because citizens and tourists who come to the country with their monies and their investments are also being attacked and killed. How is that also affecting the industry, and what has been the efforts of government in tackling that issue? What do you think they can do to right the wrongs when it comes to insecurity in South Africa?
Well, safety and security is quite important, and even for us in the tourism industry, it's quite critical. Everyone who travels to any country in the world, they want to make sure that they are safe and secured, and they're able to do what they're supposed to do and return home safe. And that remains a priority for us in the tourism industry. And there are various initiatives that we've put in place to make sure that all tourism nodes across the country are safe and they're secure, and people are able to travel freely, and they're able to go back home, when they finish doing, tourism, as we say. So for us, from our side, we have put measures in place. The crime against tourists are very, very minimal. They do happen here and there, just like any other country in the world. But we have put some measures in place, as I've said. From the country point of view, I think that's something that government is actively dealing with. There's a lot of talk around crime and containing crime. And I'm sure government will succeed at some point in dealing with crime. And I think it's also a phenomenon that impacts Africa as a continent. When we talk about tourism, the first thing that anyone who wants to travel within Africa or into Africa, one of the things that they talk about is their personal safety and as to whether it's going to be guaranteed or not. And I think as a continent, we need to do a better job of improving our image and showcasing the continent as the next tourism, destination, of the world. In other words, a preferred destination for everyone to come and learn our culture, our food, our indigenous knowledge, and many other things that we have as a continent. So we need to work very closely together as a continent to get rid of this stigma that we've had for many, many years and showcase the other side of Africa, because we do have a lot more to offer. And yes, crime is there and many other things are there. So is other continents around the world. They do have similar type of situation. For us, I think we need to improve, and it's definitely for us in South Africa, it's something that we're prioritizing to make sure that the image of the country is portrayed in a fair manner, and it ensures that we grow tourism.
So now that the holiday season is approaching, are we expected to see the figures of tourists coming into the country increase? And of course, regardless of the issues inherent that we have talked about, do you think that that can also improve the economy of the country? Would that also mean that feeding forward after the holiday seasons, South Africa tourism sector will be able to improve on those figures and sustain on them going forward?
No, absolutely. We do believe that, come this season, there will be an improvement. As I've said, that the airlines are already adding new capacity into South Africa. So there will be more numbers coming into South Africa from the African continent and also from other continents around the world. The next thing is that with these numbers that we have, we need to sustain them. And our strategy going forward is that we need to be able to attract about 10.6 million tourists by 2030 and create a few million jobs across the value chain of the tourism industry. So sustainability for us is key. Growing tourism means that there has to be an incremental increase, if I may put it that way. That happens every year in terms of the number of tourists coming into the country, as well as the amount of money that we're going to receive as an export earning, based on tourism. So for us, we are working on ensuring that we increase the numbers. With increased numbers, we will earn more revenue. With earning more revenue, we'll have more impact on the economy of this country, more impact on the employment figures in the country, and therefore we should be able to impact the economy positively. So sustainability is key, and it is one of the biggest things that pushes us to do what we do. And I do believe that we will be able to achieve the figures that we set for ourselves by 2030, and therefore the tourism economy will be larger than what it is today. And hopefully we will improve the percentage that we contribute to the GDP to a higher percentage than what we have at the moment.
Are you also looking at collaborations and partnership deals with local and foreign investors to boost the sector?
No, absolutely. For us to deal with increased number of tourists that we expect to come into the country, we need to increase the infrastructure that we have. It means that we need to attract foreign investors, and of course, local investors are important because they give confidence to the foreign investors. So there is a pipeline, or shall I put it as a master plan, in terms of what are the things that needs to be done to get to these 10.6 million tourists by 2030. We're going to need more runways. We're going to need more hotels. We're going to need more buses. We're going to need new stretch of highways to be built, new destinations to be discovered and to be cleaned up so that we can present this destination to the tourists. And of course, we need to be ready for all these markets. China is going to be very important to us because we need to attract more and more tourists coming from that part of the world. We need to be China ready, from technology to many other things that are needed for that market to be able to consider us as a destination. So there will be a lot of foreign investments that's going to be needed into the country. We will also need the investment from our own South African investors to ensure that this destination, when we say we're going to be delivering world-class tourism, indeed we need to be showing that when tourists arrive in the country, and they need to go back and tell others to come into the country. So that will be needed. It's part of the bigger master plan in terms of development of tourism into South Africa.
Well, nice to have you have mentioned China. Of course, you know that U.S. and, of course, African leaders will be having strong discussions today, even as the U.S.-Africa Summit will be kickstarting today. And that could also be another avenue for African leaders to also table their content and see how they can improve the sectors of the economy that will bring about an economic boom for them. But then that would also be a discussion for another day. But quickly, I'd like you to talk about the issue of how to prevent aftershocks of unprecedented situations. Nobody saw COVID-19 coming. There are other situations that have happened. How do you think that South African government can go about insulating, most especially the tourism sector, from unprecedented shocks? In about 30 seconds.
Well, we all know that tourism is very vulnerable to anything, be it wars, be it diseases, and many other things that affects it. But I think that what we need to do, and from what we've learned from COVID, is to sketch some scenarios in terms of what could happen and what we should be doing and how we should be communicating. So that whole crisis management scenario is quite critical, and we are already starting doing that in terms of crisis management so that we can have a plan that will guide us into the future. Of course, we don't know what's going to happen next, but we need to have scenarios to say, if X happens, what do we do and how do we come out of it? So we are ready for that, and we're putting together crisis management scenarios.
All right. Thank you so much, Tshifhiwa, for talking to us this morning.
Thank you.
Now, this may be a happy time for South Africa, as in the year 2021-2022 financial report, the number of visitors to the country's national parks increased by 74% from 1.997 million during the COVID-19 lockdowns to about 3.483 million. Now, according to governments, the recovery primarily at this stage in the domestic tourism market reflects that the South African economic reconstruction and recovery plan in the tourism sector is well on track, just as our guest has also reiterated. So let's see how that how that can bring about an economic boom or transformation for South Africa, looking at it as a prototype for other African countries who are hoping to also improve their tourism sector. And that is where we draw the curtains on today's edition of Business Edge. You can follow us on social media. We are at New Central TV. You can head to our website and download our mobile app on App Store and Play Store. Until next time, I am Lekan Onabanjo. Have a wonderful day.